Now, let's turn our attention to the Reserve Board today. The bank said that they were going to keep interest rates on hold at 4.35%. That's for a sixth straight month. Joined now by Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. Ross, thanks for your time. I raised this with Andrew Clennell earlier, where you have Michelle Bullock today, and we learn so much more about this these days. She revealed that the interest rate cut was not even discussed by the Reserve, but a rise was. Here's what she said in that media conference, Ross.
No, the case for a cut was not considered. I think I should say, because I haven't said it yet today, we're not ruling anything in or anything out at the moment.
So not ruling anything in?
I don't know, Ross, do we?
Or out, right?
Do we really need to know that?
No, I know we do know that. I think she was tongue-in-cheek at that point because she said it so many times. But what is instructive about that is for everything that we've heard about, 3 interest rate cuts this year. And remember, even with the government, the plan originally was to have 2 interest rate cuts at least this year, then call an election. They would have had cost of living relief coming as a result of the budget from July 1, plus tax cuts coming. A whole lot of stuff was building up to give consumers more money in their pockets, more relief as it were. That was the final icing on the cake, the cherry on top for the government to then call an election. Well, it ain't going to happen because the fact of the matter is that the Reserve Bank at no point has considered cutting interest rates. At no meeting have they ever considered cutting interest rates. It has only been either keep them on hold or raise interest rates. And what happens right now is, unlike the government actually getting a chance to maybe consider going into an election with interest rate cuts, we're the government that gave you interest rate cuts, it now may be the government that gives you interest rate rises. And the reason for that is because it appears as though, as we keep on talking about, inflation is higher than what was anticipated and not disappearing. That the number of jobs being created in this country is much stronger than anticipated. And so from that point of view, you heard Michelle Bullock today talking about this narrow path that we're on that's getting narrower and narrower. And what that basically means is they're running out of room to really keep these rates on hold because the economy is outperforming what's expected. And really that leads to August potentially seeing a rise in interest rates, especially if the next inflation number we see out next month is going to be increased.
Yeah, the PM will be real happy about that. As you know, Ross, when you plough into these minutes from these board meetings, you dig out some nuggets. The Australian late today is reporting that the Reserve Bank board is actually being critical of big spending budgets, both federal and state, that have been released recently. And I guess they refer to, obviously, Chalmers' federal budget and particularly the Queensland state budget in a lead up to an election there with, free public transport, discounts on everything from your power bills to whatever. So the board is saying, well, some of this inflation at least is due to government overspending.
Well, effectively, and what you're seeing now, and I've got it in my hot little hand here, Moody's ratings, it does the ratings for Australia and also for the states after the New South Wales budget today is really saying right now that the balance of risks in New South Wales interest and financial strength is right now negative, and that's because of that big spending where within 4 years, effectively there's going to be another $50-60 billion worth of debt piled on top of what they've got to $240 billion. And remember that New South Wales is in a far better position than what Victoria is in, where effectively they're having to suspend infrastructure projects simply because A, they don't have the financial capacity to build them, and B, there is also the mounting problem of basically these projects coming in way over budget, trying to get the workers for them. So in many ways you can see that Australia is almost grinding to a halt right now, and notwithstanding the fact that the economy is barely teetering above a recession right now, with the last quarter just 0.1% and this quarter probably negative, the reality is that you'd expect under normal circumstances the Reserve Bank would come to the rescue, start to cut interest rates and get some economic growth going. Well, it can't do that right now, and mainly because of this strange experiment that Australia's got to try and keep as many people in a job as they possibly can, and so therefore allowing inflation to remain above the target and also trying to keep interest rates higher for longer. That's an experiment. It hasn't worked anywhere else in the Western world before. Australia's on this experiment, and so at a time when Canada, Europe, maybe the UK in the near future cut interest rates, here in Australia, we've got the prospect of rates rising and not falling.
You've got great historical perspective on these things. We're seeing increasingly day by day, week by week, businesses falling over. I think a couple of largish businesses today fell over. That means people out of work. That means that the economy is not growing. Are you worried about the future of businesses being able to keep their doors open if the interest rates stay where they are?
Yeah, I'm worried about the bold experiment just not having worked. And that when you saw, say, our neighbours in New Zealand raise interest rates much more aggressively than Australia, put themselves into a recession, have unemployment higher than what it is here in Australia, but get to the end of the process much more quickly. Here, it's almost death by a thousand cuts in some ways, trying to maintain full employment, which is honourable and it's a good thing. But the fact of the matter is that there is no productivity growth in Australia. If all of the workers out there were highly productive and we had an economy that was actually pumping and booming along right now, you probably have inflation lower than what it is. You wouldn't even be talking about this argument. But the fact of the matter is that Australia's economy is not productive. We don't have a flexible labour force because of, guess what, many of the laws that have been brought in by the Labor government, which makes bargaining sort of on an industry-wide basis, which means that people can't easily get a job in the gig economy or part-time work or casual work without potentially having to become full-timers in the future. So this is where Australia is almost creating rules that actually work against the economy rather than working for the economy to make it flexible to get through these tight times.
You got to say, Roscoe, just finally, that would mean probably an election later rather than sooner. We were starting to talk about the end of this year, but the Reserve Bank probably today, Michelle Bullock, probably put a kibosh on that.
Oh, you'd have to think so. Now, Anthony Albanese would be wanting to stay in power as long as he possibly can to try and see out this term because the prospect of having an economic situation by the end of this year that is really conducive for the Labor Party to win favour, especially at a time when it seems to be losing a bit of skin in the polls, becomes more difficult. And do bear in mind that by the end of this year, if you get a rate rise in August, I mean, there'll be many parts of our economy that will erupt. The small business sector, there's no doubt, will find it even tougher. You'll certainly find that many households will also find it tougher. And if jobs start to be lost, that's generally a very dangerous time historically for governments. And so really, as I say, when you see what corporate reputations can do so quickly, it can also happen to political reputations. And that's why right now the stewardship and the messaging and even to a certain extent the cohesiveness of the Labor government is absolutely vital to its future survival because on the other side of it, you've of course got Peter Dutton talking about energy and energy policy and talking about trying to bring down prices at a time when really right now many people continue to feel the cost of living crisis.
Ross Greenwood, thanks very much.
Correct.